Imagine for a second that you are sitting at the controls of a commercial airliner.
Okay.
You're cruising comfortably, say, 35,000 feet. The flight has been entirely routine.
The best kind of flight.
Exactly. But then, suddenly, the master warning chimes just start echoing through the flight deck.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And in a matter of seconds, you realize that two of your main hydraulic systems have completely failed.
That is a massive problem.
Right. The autopilot abruptly disconnects, the control laws degrade, all the handling characteristics shift, and, you are hundreds of miles from your destination with this incredibly complex systems problem just unfolding in real time.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin?
It's a nightmare scenario.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host.
And I'm your resident expert. Really excited to be here.
Today we are exploring a highly detailed masterclass instructor document. It's titled Managing A320 Dual Hydraulic Failures via QRH Summaries.
Quite a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but our mission today is to unpack exactly how A320 pilots are trained to handle one of the absolute most demanding situations they can face, whether that's in the simulator or out on the line.
And, I really want to stress why this matters to you, the listener, because while this is obviously a deeply technical aviation document, the core lessons here, they absolutely transcend the flight deck.
Right.
What we are really looking at is a masterclass in crisis management. It's about cognitive load distribution and really disciplined decision-making under extreme pressure.
Yeah.
So the way these flight crews are trained to manage this specific mechanical failure, it offers a blueprint that you can apply to almost any high-stress, chaotic environment in your own life.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer gravity of this failure is, it's remarkable when you read through those instructor notes.
It really is.
A dual hydraulic failure on an A320 is officially categorized as complex procedure.
Yes.
And that classification really comes down to the massive system degradation that the airframe experiences, right?
Exactly. You are losing so much capability all at once.
You lose the autopilot. The flight control computers revert to what they call alternate law. And crucially, you are guaranteed to be landing in an abnormal configuration.
Which is a severe test of crew coordination.
Yeah, so what is the very first thing the crew is supposed to do?
Well, what's fascinating here is the emphasis on system logic.
Logic.
Right. It's this predefined, rigid sequence of how the pilots must respond to that initial shock. Because, human instinct in a sudden cascading crisis is often to reach for the ultimate reference guide.
You just want to figure out how the story ends.
Exactly. And in the A320, that ultimate guide for this scenario is the QRH summary, the quick reference handbook.
Okay.
But the absolute first step the system logic dictates is that you do not touch the QRH.
Wait, really? Not at all?
Not at all. The immediate non-negotiable response is to completely apply the ECAM procedure.
The ECAM, the Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitor.
You got it.
So the ECAM is basically putting the immediate fires out.
Yes. It isolates the failed systems, reconfigures what's left, and stabilizes the aircraft right that very second.
And a crucial part of that initial ECAM discipline is reviewing the status page, right? To get a hard baseline of the aircraft's current health.
Absolutely. And the instructor notes highlight a very specific mandated trigger point here.
Oh, the verbal call-out.
Yes. The flight crew is literally forbidden from transitioning over to the QRH summary until the pilot monitoring explicitly announces the phrase, ECAM actions complete.
Wow.
It serves as a definitive cognitive boundary.
ECAM actions complete. That's fascinating. But why do instructors emphasize that so heavily?
Oh, it's instructor trap number one. The psychological pull of that summary is immense because human beings hate unresolved ambiguity.
Especially highly trained professionals. They want a plan.
Exactly. That psychological friction is why instructors constantly see experienced crews fall into this specific trap during simulator sessions. They prematurely jump to the QRH.
Because the temptation to look ahead and figure out how they are going to actually land the plane is overpowering.
Right. But rushing to that summary before the ECAM is entirely finished, it risks missing critical, immediate system reconfigurations that the computers are actively trying to guide the crew through.
So you have to secure the immediate present before you can plan the future.
Beautifully said, yes.
Finish the ECAM, clear the cascading system warnings, formally announce ECAM actions complete. Only then do you pull out the broader map.
Precisely.
Which, it raises an interesting point about Airbus design philosophy.
Oh.
Yeah, if the ECAM is so thoroughly integrated into the aircraft's architecture to handle these failures, why design a separate, paper-based QRH summary format for this specific emergency?
That's the million-dollar question. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of flight deck management, the ECAM actually has a fundamental limitation in this specific context.
Okay, what is it?
In a dual hydraulic failure, the A320 is so heavily degraded that the ECAM alone simply cannot seamlessly manage the chronological flow for the rest of the flight.
It's too complex.
Right. The ECAM is highly tactical. It is perfect for the right now. But it cannot look an hour into the future to sequence a highly complex, multi-layered arrival.
Ah, okay.
That is the operational gap the QRH summary fills. It acts as a strategic roadmap for the crew, strictly divided into 4 chronological phases.
Cruise, approach, landing, and go-around.
Exactly.
I love how rigidly structured that is because it offloads the executive functioning from the pilot's brains when their cognitive bandwidth is just totally maxed out.
It does all the heavy lifting.
Yeah. I was reading through the section on the approach preparation phase, and the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like executing a massive master recipe for a complex dinner service.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. So the master recipe dictates the overall timeline, but at a certain point, it tells you to pull in a separate sub-recipe and integrate it.
Yes, that is exactly what the QRH summary does.
Depending on which specific hydraulic systems are lost, the summary guides the pilots through integrating independent sub-procedures.
Right, like the landing with slacks or flaps jammed procedure.
Exactly, or the landing gear gravity extension procedure. It weaves all of those separate emergencies seamlessly into the approach phase, so nothing is dropped.
The synthesis required there is incredible. And that strategic planning actually begins way back in the cruise phase.
How so?
Well, the summary forces the crew to hit pause, assess the remaining systems, and figure out their actual degraded flight capabilities.
Which involves some heavy analytical lifting.
Oh, absolutely. The
Okay.
crew has to calculate the increased fuel consumption, because flying with jammed flaps or deploying the gear early, that creates massive aerodynamic drag.
Right.
They also have to calculate their landing performance to ensure the runway at their chosen diversion airport is actually long enough.
Because they might not have normal braking.
Right, exactly. No normal braking, maybe no spoilers or no thrust reversers. You need to know you can stop the plane.
So they are basically doing high-level physics and fuel management calculations while managing an active emergency.
Well, it's a lot.
Let's shift the focus to the physical flying of the aircraft, though. Because the sources detail a very stark reality for the pilot flying.
Yes, they do.
In a scenario like a green and blue system failure or a green and yellow failure, the autopilot is completely lost.
It's gone.
The saving grace is that the flight director and the auto thrust generally remain available, but the human pilot is entirely responsible for the flight path.
And this brings us back to the absolute bedrock of aviation. Golden Rule 1.
Fly, navigate, communicate.
In that exact order. Because the A320 is now operating in alternate law, the flight control computers aren't providing their normal protections.
The handling is entirely different.
Completely different, and the cognitive capacity of the pilot flying must be 100% dedicated to the physical act of flying.
Just keeping the plane in the air.
Right. They are hand-flying a swept-wing airliner at altitude with significantly degraded control surfaces.
Which introduces another major trap that instructors see in the simulator. Instructor trap number 2.
The distraction trap.
Exactly. The pilot flying naturally wants to help solve the problem. They start looking over at the ECAM screens or glancing down at the QRH.
Which is human nature. You want to see what's going on.
But the instructor notes explicitly state the pilot flying must keep their eyes on the flight path and primary flight display.
They have to.
They have to maneuver the aircraft with extreme care to avoid putting high hydraulic demand on the single remaining system.
Yes, this is so critical. Erratic or aggressive side stick inputs could easily overwhelm the last bit of hydraulic pressure they have available.
So the physical inputs have to be incredibly smooth and deliberate.
Incredibly smooth. And because the pilot flying is entirely consumed by maintaining the aircraft's state, the entire burden of navigating,
Which includes running that dense, multi-layered QRH summary.
and communicating, all of that shifts entirely to the pilot monitoring.
The PM is essentially running a highly complex single-pilot systems operation while their colleague flies the plane.
That's a great way to put it.
And the communication aspect of that division of labor is where instructor trap number 3 emerges, a communication breakdown.
Right.
The masterclass document points out that a dual hydraulic failure automatically generates a red land ASAP warning on the ECAM.
Which means it is a time-critical emergency.
But because the pilot monitoring is handling so many radios and checklists, there is a noted tendency to downplay the crisis to air traffic control.
Yes. Crews will sometimes declare a PAN-TAN, which just indicates an urgency rather than escalating to a full mayday.
Which is crazy to think about. Why do they do that?
Well, the psychology of underreporting emergencies is well documented. Highly competent professionals often don't want to make a scene, or they don't want to clear the airspace unnecessarily.
They don't want to be a burden.
Exactly. However, the sources are unequivocal here. A red land ASAP on the A320 requires you to declare a mayday to ATC.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. You need the airspace completely cleared, you need the emergency equipment rolling on the ground, and you need priority routing without any delays.
Declaring a mayday instantly cuts through the noise.
It communicates the absolute severity of the system degradation to the controllers so they can allocate every available resource to that flight.
Own the emergency.
Right.
Don't let professional pride or desire to minimize the situation override the operational requirements.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the final stages of the flight as they begin their descent.
The approach and landing phases.
Right. The QRH summary doesn't just dictate the configuration of the aircraft, it actually structures the exact flow of the arrival briefing.
Yes.
It forces the crew to cross-check that ECAM status page at every single step of the briefing to verify the current state of the airframe.
Because the environment is highly dynamic. You have to constantly verify that you haven't lost any further systems since the cruise phase.
Things that can change.
Exactly. This rigorous structuring prevents inadequate briefings, which is instructor trap number 4 highlighted in the document.
Because this is definitely not a standard ILS to a full stop.
Not even close. The pilot flying is already hand flying in alternate law, but it gets significantly more demanding.
Because of the landing gear.
Right. When they execute that gravity gear extension, dropping the landing gear manually, the A320's flight control system will often drop from alternate law all the way down to direct law.
The transition to direct law. That fundamentally changes the relationship between the pilot and the airplane.
It really does. All the computer smoothing, the auto trimming, the flight envelope protections, they are all gone.
The relationship between the pilot moving the side stick and the control surfaces moving on the wings becomes direct and proportional.
It is raw, unassisted flying. And the aircraft will feel completely different in the pitch and roll axis.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. And because of that impending transition, the briefing has to be absolutely meticulous.
The instructor notes actually list the exact items they expect crews to brief.
Yes. What do they look for?
They have to discuss the use of selected speeds. They have to brief the precise timing of when they will initiate that gravity gear extension. And they have to brief the abnormal approach configuration.
Right. And crucially, they also have to brief tail strike awareness.
Tail strike awareness. Why is that so prevalent here?
Well, depending on the failure, they might be landing with jammed flaps, meaning their approach speed will be much higher, and the nose of the aircraft will be pitched up at a much steeper angle than normal.
Oh, I see.
Making it incredibly easy to scrape the tail on the runway during the flare.
That makes perfect sense. They also have to comprehensively brief the go-around configuration and speed.
Which is a whole other nightmare.
Right. If they have to abort the landing at the last second, they are initiating a go-around with the landing gear permanently stuck down, degraded thrust, and flight controls in direct law.
It's a one-shot deal in many ways. It requires immense precision.
And that operational pressure perfectly highlights the final piece of wisdom from the document. Golden Rule 4.
Take action if things do not go as expected.
The QRH summary is your primary tool, and you have to trust its structure to guide your decision-making all the way down to the chocks.
Trusting the architecture of the procedure is paramount, because in a cascading emergency of this magnitude, human cognition degrades.
It just does.
Time distortion occurs, critical steps seem unnecessary, and the natural stress response tries to override procedural logic.
You want to rush.
Exactly. But the QRH summary is a crystallized version of thousands of hours of Airbus engineering, flight testing, and human factors research.
It's smarter than you are in that moment?
Yes, it is a system designed to be vastly more reliable than a human brain under maximum stress. Trusting that system and rigidly trusting the division of labor between the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring is the only reliable way to manage the aircraft back to the ground safely.
It really is a phenomenal look behind the flight deck door.
It truly is.
To synthesize what we've unpacked today, managing a complex emergency like an A320 dual hydraulic failure isn't merely a test of stick and rudder flying skills.
Not at all.
It is fundamentally a test of rigid discipline. It's about executing that strict division of cognitive labor. Fly, navigate, communicate.
Golden Rule 1.
The pilot flying dedicates every ounce of focus to the physical flight path, managing the control laws smoothly, while the pilot monitoring manages the broader crisis and ATC communication.
Right.
And above all, it's about trusting a perfectly sequenced chronological system to guide you through the chaos rather than rushing to fix things prematurely.
You know, this raises an important question and something I think is highly applicable beyond aviation.
Let's hear it.
If highly trained professional commercial pilots, people who practice these exact scenarios constantly in the simulator,
Yeah.
if they require a strict multi-stage physical checklist to prevent their brains from skipping steps or bypassing logic during a sudden system failure, how often do you incorrectly rely on your own unaided memory when the foundational systems in your personal or professional life suddenly break down?
Wow, that is a brilliant point to leave things on. A little bit of prepared structural discipline goes a very long way when the master warning chimes start ringing in our own lives.
It really does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the intricacies of A320 emergency management. We hope you can take these high-stakes lessons on cognitive discipline, communication, and trusting the process right into your everyday operations. Until next time.